What's going on, folks, and welcome in to today's episode of Cards Hub 365, powered by Gray Bar and presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Brenden Schaeffer, Mike Claiborne of the Cardinals Radio Network, here with you today. As Mike, we've got a 3-game winning streak to talk about with the Cardinals as they head into another date with Paul Skenes tonight at Busch Stadium.
Yeah, it's been a good run so far, the last 3 games. And you mentioned Paul Skenes. The Cardinals have had reasonable success against him. So this will be fun tonight to see if they can keep that going.
And on the mound for the Cardinals is going to be Matthew Liberatore. So a pretty good pitching matchup tonight at Busch Stadium. And it really does feel like right now you want to take advantage of a team like the Pirates with where the Cardinals have been. You know, there was a point in time where they were a handful of games below 500. Now suddenly you're 2 games under. And if you find a way against Skenes tonight, you got the afternoon game tomorrow before you head on a road trip. This team could find its way back to 500, I think, Claibs, a lot more quickly than people would have anticipated in the middle of that Mets series before Sunday's games.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Brandon. They've been playing some clean baseball. The pitching has fallen in the line. The ability to come from behind is something they've been able to do. And, it's all the things that you would want to see in a ball club right now. And it's not like they're playing, chopped liver. You mentioned 2 out of 3 against the Mets. Now, let's face it, the Pirates are struggling a little bit, but you can't take them for granted. And, the best example is the Cardinals could have done this last year and come in, and here come the Pirates, and they lose 2 out of 3 against the Pirates after winning 2 out of 3 against the Mets. So you're seeing signs of improvement, but you got to keep it going. It'll be something to see tonight because, as we mentioned, Skenes is one of the best pitchers in the game. But, you look at his record, and that means that somebody else is beating him. So maybe it's the Cardinals' turn.
Yeah, and his last time out against the Mets was a little bit of against the Cubs was a little bit of an uncharacteristic outing for Paul Skenes too. So he's got a 2.74 ERA. He's still been very good. That's pretty darn good. But there are some cases where teams have been able to get to him. What do you think a lineup like the Cardinals, and we'll talk about who they've got in the starting 9 coming up. What do you think a lineup like the Cardinals looks to do as they approach a game against a pitcher like this?
Be patient early. Skenes has a variety of pitches, and I think what you have to do with him is reduce the pitches he's good with that night. He throws 5 or 6, but let's say he stays with 3, and you have to figure out what those 3 are and be able to look early. I'm not sure if that's a guy you want to play with when you run it to a full count. Now, there's a handful of guys. Brendan Donovan would be one of them that would be in a position where he could handle a 3-2 count or an 0-2 count. Then there are other guys that, it's not going to end well. And I think with Skenes, the Cardinals have a tell on him. And maybe there's some other teams that do too. And I'm of the belief that the way this game is played today, it doesn't take long for teams and people to figure out what you're good at and what you're not good at. And they can tell whether you're tipping pitches and, flexing your glove and maybe you're throwing a change. There's a lot of things that go into that. And with him, we'll see where it goes tonight. But I think you have to be patient early and not get yourself in a hole. But don't be afraid to swing early. We have some guys who have some pretty good percentages on first pitch swinging. And so that may come into play too. But, to end this, Skenes is not your normal get me over first with a fastball. He throws other pitches for strikes that would certainly – you wouldn't think about using them. I wouldn't think about using them, but he can use them in the first pitch, and that's something you have to be aware of also.
Yeah, and the Cardinals, they look to have a pretty balanced lineup here tonight, Claibs. Nootbaar, Wayne Donovan, Arenado, Contreras, Burleson at first base, Pozo the catcher, Walker, and Victor Scott II in center field is going to be Oliver Marmol's lineup tonight. One of the guys in the middle of that lineup, Claibs, has been Wilson Contreras, who seemingly has been back to himself the last couple of weeks with the numbers that he's putting together.
He really has. And, when you think about what a dreadful start he got off to, and he remained patient, didn't pout, didn't change up things, just waited on things to get better for him. Some guys, as the weather gets more consistent, so do they. And I'm not saying our weather is ultra consistent right now because I think I'm looking out the window now. It's not raining, but that could all change in a minute. But point being, guys, they have that internal clock that, certain times of the year, here it comes. And, we've seen this with Contreras before. So I'm not really surprised. I'm certainly happy And, good hitting, like good pitching is contagious, man. You get a couple of other guys going, and all of a sudden you really have something working for you.
And one of those guys I think that could be really relevant if this Cardinal offense is going to find that consistency it's looking for. We didn't see a lot of that from Alec Burleson in the power department early in the season, but the last couple of days he's had a couple of home run swings that he's brought. How much of a factor do you think that has to be in his game in order to kind of justify what his role could be on this team moving forward?
Well, that's a good question. I think that has to be part of his game, a big part of his game. You pencil him in. He's a 23 to 26 home run guy. He should be. At least that's what we've seen in the past. He's driven in runs. He too got off to a tough start. And, I think guys start to press a little bit. And, he's kind of a free swinger. So, it depends on the pitcher too, on what happens. And if there's a pitcher who will make Burleson get himself out, then he's going to have a problem. But, if Burleson is patient and make sure he swings and strikes, he can create some real damage.
And he's a guy that in past seasons hasn't really had as high of a strikeout rate, maybe a little elevated this year, but you wouldn't expect him to have that be too much of a trend. And if he's offsetting with power numbers as well, there's a lot of reasons to like him in the lineup. It'll also get kind of interesting, though, Claibs, with Ivan Herrera due back here before too long. What ends up happening kind of with that DH spot as you figure, okay, is that a way to get Ivan's bat in the lineup a little more frequently?
Yeah, I think it is, because Pages has done a nice job behind the plate. And if you don't believe me, ask O'Neal Cruz. I mean, that was a great play last night. But Herrera's bat is valuable. You're going to have a log jam now between Herrera, Nootbaar, well, not maybe Nootbaar as much as maybe Brendan Donovan and Nolan Gorman and Alec Burleson, and I mean, you got to be very flexible. You may have to look at more matchups and who they're facing. Obviously, the lefty-righty situation is going to come into play. But overall, if you're Ali, you just have to play the hot guy, whether he's hitting lefties or right. You have to play the hot guy. And the other guys just need to stay ready. And how they stay ready, that's a challenge for guys who are young players who may not be used to coming off the bench and playing, every third day. Those are all the things that go into play that you really have to think about, along with being better prepared for who you are going to face. I mean, you look down the line, they know what the rotation is going to look like. They know what the bullpen is going to look like. And you have to be prepared for that matchup somewhere along the way. And I think they've done a good job of that so far.
Yeah, and it'll get a little more crowded with Herrera coming in, but certainly a guy that can provide a boost to the lineup. I think the lineup looked at its best when Ivan Herrera was part of it. And you talk about trying to find some guys that can hit for power. For the longest time, Claibs, he was at least tied for the team lead in home runs until more recently, despite being a guy that hadn't played a lot. And we know that the Cardinals want to see that development from him behind the plate. That's an obvious way to get his bat in the lineup. But I think at a certain point, they may just have to say, if he's one of those hot bats like you talked about, they're going to have to find different ways to potentially get him in there.
Yeah. And you know what? Here's the other thing. If other guys play better, then somebody sits anyway. My concern or question is, and because we haven't seen him in this role enough, what is Ivan Herrera from a power standpoint? I know he had the big day where he hit the 3 home runs, but is that who he is? And is he a doubles guy? Is he a gap guy? And the only way we're going to find out, he has to play with some sort of regularity. And again, that kind of creates some other issues with regard to who's going to play second base and who's going to DH, righty, lefty. Those things come into a real key question that Ali and the staff are going to have to address.
Yeah, and a couple of those guys that we know the Cardinals are intent upon getting some looks for, and things maybe aren't going so well recently. We're talking about Nolan Gorman. We're talking about Jordan Walker. The Cardinals as a team starting to come around. Those two guys, it's tricky, Claibs, because you want to make sure you're giving them, the runway, the opportunity that the Cardinals have talked about to be able to show their wares and what they're capable of doing. But by the same token, you mentioned some other guys that if they're playing at a higher level, that's got to be a tricky conversation, I feel like, for the Cardinals as they navigate this summer.
Well, especially if you're winning. Right. I mean, if you're losing, you can kind of play with some things a little bit. And I'll give you a good example. The last year, Adam Wainwright pitched, and he was trying to go after 200 victories. The way he was pitching, if this team was winning, Adam Wainwright would have never gotten to 200 victories, the way he was pitching. But, you had some runway for him to use, and you gutted it out. This situation is one where if the Cardinals are winning and Gorman isn't producing, if they're producing without him, then that's a tough question. That's a tough situation to deal with. And, again, we look at matchups and things of that nature that maybe finds him some consistent at bats. But listen, they've thrown him out there a lot, and it's not working according to plan. We've gone through a few batting coaches now. Brant Brown, we thought kind of had a hold of things. It's kind of regressed somewhat. Although he's making more contact, and anytime you make contact, that's a good start. And hopefully he'll have that opportunity to get a little bit more opportunity.
Yeah, we'll see what it ends up looking like. And as you said, the record may be indicative. The standings are going to play a part in that as well for the Cardinals and figuring things out. But they are climbing in the standings ever so slightly after the last 3 games and winners in each of them. Last night, though, Claibs, at the ballpark, there was a play in particular I want to get your perspective on. It was Victor Scott II being ruled out at home plate on a hand-first slide that certainly looked on replay review like he was able to get the hand in. And I'm curious kind of the way that you saw this, because to me, I was just baffled that replay review didn't find a way. If you say Joey Bart didn't block the plate, that element of it being what it is, I don't really think that was as relevant because it looked to me pretty clearly that he was safe. But how did you see that one playing out?
Well, and now we're getting into semantics here, because I think that the only way I think that the way it was ruled, somebody had to say there was obstruction. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that's what the umpire said after the ruling. They didn't ask whether he was safe or out. So you have two different situations. I didn't think the umpire was in position to make a call on either one because he was behind the catcher on the first base side. That's a play that you probably have to be on the other side to get a good look at hand touching plate or glove or however the tag's going to be made. So I don't know if anyone asked, did they appeal him being safe or out, because it clearly showed that he was safe.
And so part of that's interesting, Claibs, I think within just the last hour or so on the KMOX show Gas House Gang, they obviously talk with Ollie Marmol every Tuesday. And he said that he's still kind of waiting on an explanation and hopes to get one from MLB today, actually, because it was a case in his conversations with the umpires that, we want you to look at obstructing the plate, obviously. But the other aspect of it that they asked him, what do you want looked at? And he said all of it is the way he related to the guys this afternoon. To where, of course, you want to know out or safe at home play. So that was something that, according to Ollie,
the play right. Yeah, I mean, you got to get the play right. Is he out or safe? Because and then the next question is he if he's out, is it because of obstruction?
Right.
And the answer on that is no. I mean, he was obviously safe. So I'm anxious to hear it, and hopefully by the time I interview Ollie for the pregame show, he can tell me and everybody else what he's heard from Major League Baseball. I just thought it was a bad play in positioning, and maybe they didn't hear the question right. So there's a lot of things that go into it, and again, you're splitting hairs here. I gotta be honest with you. I haven't thought in some of the other games that I've seen. I know there's one guy who had a really good night behind the plate, and his name escapes me now. But man, I've seen a lot of questionable plays where I thought I would have had a different answer. Along with this, there's a general feeling amongst some of us that when you are a crew chief and there's a bang bang play for you and it gets appealed, crew chiefs don't normally get reversed. And I don't know whether it's the fact that their buddies in New York don't want to show up a crew chief, or there's another crew chief working the replay. There's something about it. And I'm sure somewhere, someplace, there's a number on how many crew chiefs get overturned compared to other people. It's something, man, that's kind of glaring from time to time where you just say, well, wait a minute, this is a common sense call here. And the other thing I will say this, also in defense of the umpires, I've been to the replay center, and the technology that they have there is incredible. It's hard to miss it with all the angles and them being able to superimpose things. I mean, they don't miss it by much. Okay. So they have the technology and they continue to improve it. But there are some things that common sense would come into play and just say, hey, wait a minute, man, the guy's safe. And I thought what I would have done I would have looked, because I think they said maybe his hand never touched the plate. You know how when you slide into a base, sometimes your
Sure.
top foot doesn't touch the base. I don't know whether they're implying that, but you know what I would have done? I would have looked at the bottom of his hand. I would have looked at the bottom of his hand. If there's dirt, he's safe.
That's the thing is, I think that's the only way they could have possibly said. It's not like they said call confirmed. They said the call stands.
Yeah.
And at first he did address the obstruction, said no blocking of the plate, and then he says call stands, which implies that they maybe couldn't tell definitively whether he touched it. I just don't. All the dirt on his. I mean, you see the dirt flying in the air. What comes next after you're touching dirt? The plate. I know it's not raised up like a base. Home plate is still. It's right. I thought he was safe to his elbow, Claibs. I couldn't believe that.
I agree with you. And you know what? The other thing, Brendan, I don't know if any umpire has that sort of eyesight to be that, where he can zero in like that to determine whether the hand was off the plate. I just think it was a play. Again, I think there are two things. We don't know how it was asked, how it was posed. Was it obstruction or safe or out? Which one are you calling here? You would think the common sense would say, well, is he safe? And then they say no. And I would probably say something to the effect, he's either safe or let's say he's out because of obstruction.
Right.
So, again, we weren't there for the conversation in how it was conveyed to the umpire for them to send it back. But I'll tell you, man, had that game been closer, we probably, we're already talking about it now. I'm sure Ollie would have been on the phone this morning and everybody else within the organization to find out just what the heck was going on.
And he still said on the KMOX show he's hoping to get an explanation from the league, and we'll see later on whether or not that's something that he is able to share and deliver if in fact the league ends up coming up with it. Because to the point, like Cardinals win the game 6-3, that's all well and good. You don't use the same relievers. You don't have to burn the same relievers necessarily in a 4-run game.
And the inning keeps going. The inning keeps going too.
It keeps going. They may score additional runs. Graceffo, who got the win, only pitched the 6th. He may stay in 7th, 8th. He may do a McGreevy the way we saw him do on Sunday, which absolutely changes things for Oliver Marmol for not only today, but tomorrow before the Thursday off day. So that's part of it where if you've got the replay technology, you mentioned not wanting to overturn a crew chief. If there's an element of that anecdotally certainly feels like that is a possibility. The ump was in the wrong spot. I would agree he could have been better positioned, but they can see every angle imaginable on replay, and that's why it's just I couldn't believe they didn't overturn it with that in mind.
Well, here's how I'll end it. This is not a perfect game played by perfect people, and umpires miss it too. Replay people miss it too, and maybe because of another angle they had that we didn't have is why they said what they did. But you know what? Everybody has a bad night, and I'm inclined to think that somebody in blue had a bad night last night. Now, I could be proven wrong, and they may come back and say, well, here's what we had.
Yeah.
Which maybe I didn't see. But, man, to the naked eye, and that's all I have, it just sure looked like it was safe. And I can see why they were raising a flag on obstruction, because Bart gave him about 2 inches of the plate to be able to touch. And had he been steamrolled, we'd have a whole nother situation, because he didn't give Scott much room to tag the base. And maybe it comes back to guys getting blown up again, because the catchers have gotten smarter about how much room they give these runners. But, at some point, somebody might get blown up just to prove a point about how little space, if any, these runners get trying to tag home plate.
Yeah, it certainly played to Joey Bart's benefit, because he's able to say, well, I didn't fully block it. He had a little bit of room there. But if that little bit of room was invisible on video because of the dirt flying up, suddenly they've kind of found that wiggle room. So we'll stay tuned for that pregame conversation as well with the Cardinal manager, Claibs, and if there's anything more that'll obviously come of that.
All right.
And so and we'll look forward to tonight's lineup as well. We'll give you a little bit of thoughts about everything going up against Paul Skenes. But before we do that, we want to remind you that baseball season is upon us, so you can turn your knowledge of baseball, or perhaps it's NBA basketball, NHL hockey. You can turn it into cash today with DraftKings Pick 6. New players get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly with just a $5 entry, and DraftKings Pick 6 is now available in Missouri. So download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports For new customers, to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits, better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
So Claibs, with the Cardinals taking on Skenes tonight, we'll also see what's interesting about the Cardinal bullpen. As we mentioned, weren't able to go as deep with Graceffo in a game that the Cardinals then suddenly had that 3-run lead. You use Leahy, you use Maton, you use Helsley. How do you envision the Cardinals might try to finish up a close game tonight? Because those things can tend to stack on one another.
Yeah, you're spot on. Well, first of all, you hope Liberatore can give you 7. It's going to be interesting to see. Somebody's going to have to take it and just go with it. You have JoJo should be available. That's a good start. Maton had at least 20 pitches last night, so I'm not sure about him.
Could be, yeah.
But I think what I'm going to defer to is what Ollie tells me when I ask him that question. Well, we're going to see how they feel after they play some catch.
Yeah.
And they'll come in and let them know what they have. But, it's one of those items, Brendan, that I really look at baseball having to figure out if we're going to rely on relief pitching as much as we do, where 5 innings is now acceptable and 6 innings is certainly lauded. That means your bullpen is going to work more, and that means you're going to have some guys who can give you multiple innings, and that may mean he may have to get 5 outs, and then he may have to come back the next day and get 1 out. There's a lot of ways this is going to have to work, but the day of the guy who can only give you 1, with the exception of your closer, I think that's about to change. And while you love to have the lane set up for a 7th and 8th and 9th guy, there are going to be nights where that's not going to happen, or you're going to have what I would call your 1A bullpen, guys who don't pitch they don't pitch 2 days in a row, but they're available. Let's say, who is your guy after Helsley? Who is your guy after Maton? I mean, who are those guys who are available tonight, as we just touched on? And that's, I think we're going to see a lot more in baseball, where you're going to have an A and B unit to be able to go in and take over the last 3 innings of a ball game.
And one other name that's kind of interesting within that, Claibs, is a guy who has operated in multiple roles this year, but Steven Matz hasn't pitched in a while and is available, presumably now back in the pen. You've got the off day Thursday. They're going to go back to that 5-man rotation. What do you see things looking like moving forward for Steven Matz? Because he could certainly be one of those guys who gives you multiples for the time being that he's in the pen.
I think he's that guy for now. And he's been good. I mean, even in his starting role, I thought he was accountable. But you don't want him to get stale. There is a thing about guys being a little too strong, and you've got to find a way for him to get some reasonable work in. So it's going to be a little touch and go here for a while, because, as we like to say, you never have enough pitching, but we just have a lot of pitching that's available on certain days of the week. And that's something you have to figure out how to get through.
Should be interesting for sure. And then, of course, after this series ends on Wednesday afternoon, Claibs, the Cardinals will head back out on the road. They'll go through D.C. They'll go through Philadelphia. I want to get your thoughts, because we haven't connected in a little while, on how they kind of handled the road environment in Cincinnati. It's a situation where Oliver Marmol has said, look, we're going to be the team that we are wherever we're playing. And I felt like in Cincy, you at least saw a little bit of that with what they were able to do this past Wednesday in the doubleheader.
Oh, I thought they were much more relaxed. I thought they were, better in a lot of different areas. And teams go through that, man, especially early in the year when you get out on the road. There's a different environment, whether it's weather, just accommodations, and just the whole way things are approached on the road. Your timing is different. You don't get as much work in on the field because somebody else is there. Fortunately, there's some places where you can hit more in the cage underneath, but there are a lot of things you just aren't used to doing. So, I think they'll get used to how things work, and I expect them to turn in some pretty good efforts on this next road trip, which is going to be interesting because, we see a lot of Washington in the spring. They're a team that's trying to find their way. We've already seen Philadelphia, and we know they can be a very good team. And then there's the Kansas City Royals, who are in a similar division as the Cardinals, but Kansas City found themselves in postseason last year, so you have to respect what they're doing. So it's not going to be easy. I don't think the road is ever easy, but I'm looking forward to watching to see how they match up. We should have some consistent weather, and the way the team has been pitching, that gives you a chance.
And that road trip going through 3 cities, I think will definitely tell the tale on how the Cardinals are faring when they get out on the road and there's nothing to do but play. Like you said, you have to find that routine and that mentality, and we'll see if that serves the Cardinals well. But of course, they've got to face Skenes in one more game after that against the Pirates before the Cardinals head out on a lengthy road trip. So stay tuned to Sports Hub STL. Make sure you're subscribed for all of our content, and we'll be right back here tonight with a post-game show after Cardinals v. Pirates. It's Paul Skenes versus Matthew Liberatore at Busch Stadium later this evening. But that'll do it for us on Cards Hub 365, powered by Gray Bar and presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Claibs, appreciate you, and we'll talk soon.
All right. We'll talk soon, Brendan, and let's see if we can get the Skenes tonight.
There you go. They did it before, and maybe they'll do it again. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon on Sports Hub STL.